Hello everyone and welcome to another Hiking in History episode, or a Graveyard Stories episode I should say, because this is we're not doing a hiking video, we are doing a graveyard one. As you can see, we're in a graveyard today. We're in St Johns Churchyard in Burslem. Church here, very dilapidated church. Burslem in Stoke-on-Trent, so very local for me. And the grave that we're going to be talking about today is that of a witch named Molly Leigh, the local witch of Stoke-on-Trent, and the grave is here, this one. As you can probably notice straight away, this grave is unique because if you look at all the other graves, they are all buried traditionally east to west, facing the Holy Land, but Molly Leigh, as she was a witch, we'll get into the story, but she is facing the other way, north to south. So the story of Molly Leigh is one most natives of Stoke, especially Burslem as well, around this area, know pretty well. But it does have many versions. It's got very, different variations over the hundreds of years that it's been told. Things have changed and been edited and whatnot. So I'm going to try and cover a sort of broad version of the story and the legend that happened. Whether any of it is true, of course, it's not really the point. It doesn't matter if it's true or not. It's a cool story, a great local legend, and I love all this kind of spooky stuff. So, but I'm going to give the legend, the general one. I'll give some variations of what happened as well, things that I've heard over the generations, but then also the true story as well. So Margaret Leigh, her name was Margaret Leigh, but it's always been shortened to Molly Leigh. She was born here in Burslem around 1685. The exact date isn't known, but around about 1685. And the legend has it that she was, known as a very ugly loner, a lonesome woman, never married. And she kept a pet blackbird. So, you're getting the cliches of the witch already. And she lived in a cottage not too far from here. It doesn't exist anymore, of course. It was just a wooden cottage, I guess. I think there are some pictures of it that I will get. But back in the 1600s and 1700s, this whole area of Burslem, her cottage wasn't too far from here, probably like a 10-minute walk. It was nowhere near as developed, obviously, as it is today. Mainly just farmlands, fields, farms, a few mines here and there, but very little in terms of development. So she never married, which was always a telltale sign of someone being a witch. And there were all sorts of crazy stories about her, strange things that pointed to her being a witch. So you've got one where she was able to eat a hard crust of bread from birth, like before she had any teeth or anything like that. She could supposedly eat hard crusty bread. So burn her. She's eating hard crusty bread, get rid of her, we don't want that. And that also the classic spooky one of she refused to drink milk from her mum, and instead she suckled on animals instead. And then of course her having a blackbird as a pet doesn't look good, does it? Someone had a blackbird as a pet today, I'd be a bit sus. Part of the legend also says she died, her parents died young, so she was left on her own, and she made her living by selling milk into Burslem. She'd sort of walk into the town. She had her cottage where she obviously had some animals, where she'd milk cows, and then she'd come into the town and sell her wares. Sometimes she was, again, part of the legend, she was accused of watering it down or poisoning people. And a very important detail is that she rarely went to church. Now obviously church back in the day was, if you didn't go, you were an odd one, you were an oddball. So she rarely went to church, and that was again another reason why she must have been a witch, because she couldn't enter the house of God and all that stuff. And she actually made an enemy out of someone from here, from this church, St John's, because she rarely went, a man named Mr. Parson Spector, his name was, who was a priest here at St John's way back when. I don't know if this is like the original building or not, or whether it's been sort of updated and renovated over the years. I mean, this bit looks quite old, obviously this looks quite a lot newer, but whether the church looked like this at the time, I'm not entirely sure, or if it was on a different site, I'm not sure, but it does say St John's that Parson was a part of, so this was a mortal enemy essentially, and they had a grudge against each other. He is the one that accused her of, being a witch. But this priest, Parson, he used to spend a lot of time drinking at a pub called the Turk's Head, which was in Burslem as well. And one day, Molly's blackbird appeared at this pub, was just there spookily. And on that day, apparently the beer turned sour. I think this was probably, in the legend, the main reason why he suddenly accused her of being a witch. It's probably just some random bird, just some random bird in the pub. But no, it was her bird, and it turned all the beer sour, and people were ill, and all that. And that's what made Parson, the priest, despise this woman. But despite this isn't actually a story that ends in Molly being executed or anything like that, which a lot of witch stories do. They're person's tried and executed. This actually isn't one of those stories, though. They held a grudge against each other, and they didn't like each other, Parson and Molly. But she was never tried or never executed or anything like that. She did just die in 1748. I presume of natural causes. But that isn't the end of the story. This is where, it gets supernatural and spooky. So she was actually laid to rest by Parson in this cemetery. And she wasn't laid to rest like this initially. She was like all the others, facing the right way, like everyone else. She was laid to rest by him. But strange things started happening again after she died. Things didn't stop with her death. So her pet blackbird was still knocking around. Don't know how. Again, when you actually scrutinise these legends, how was this bird around for like 40 odd years? But maybe she had another bird. She kept getting birds. Her blackbird was still around, causing mischief, attacking people, and showing up and generally just being spooky. There's also talk of crops failing and people just falling ill randomly. All this started happening just straight after Molly's death, and some of the townsfolk were very suspicious, so they went up to Molly's cottage to have a look, because they thought she wasn't really dead. And then lo and behold, the story goes, they had a few drinks. It is noted that they had a few drinks at this point, and they went up to the cottage, and lo and behold, what did they see in the cottage? They saw Molly Leigh still there by the fire knitting, and a blackbird was there with her still. And they went screaming, running out the house. That essentially is what set off this chain of events, where she's now buried like this. So Parson and the other priests had heard this. I don't know whether within the legend, he was there, at the Molly's cottage. The stories differ, but either way, he heard about this and got some other local priests together, and they decided to perform a rite to essentially silence Molly Leigh and put her to rest properly, because something hadn't gone right. So the story goes, in the dead of night, one night they managed to capture Molly's blackbird, and they brought her down here to her grave, which wouldn't have been situated there. It would have been somewhere else, or just facing the other way. And they exhumed her. They broke open the grave and threw the blackbird in, and then shut it back up and turned it to where it is now. Moved the grave and turned it the wrong way around, and the blackbird was locked in there with her, still alive. And ever since then, actually, that is it's all been quiet. There isn't that. It apparently worked, that doing this suddenly stopped all the ill things that were happening in Burslem. But there are all sort of different ones as well. I've heard ones about that's sort of the general story anyway, that's kind of known on the internet and things. But you talk to people around here, and just growing up in Stoke here, all sorts. There was, I remember hearing about it, her dying, and then things starting to happen again, like crops failing and whatnot, and then they exhumed a grave and she wasn't in there. I've heard that version where she isn't in there, and the blackbird flies out of the grave. Molly wasn't in there, but her bird was, and it flew out and scared everyone to death. So there's that version, and there's all other tales, going up to, people still swear that they see a ghost around here, around Burslem. It's just one of those great little spooky tales that are all over this country, and this is the one that's closest to me, Molly Leigh. Her grave itself is, as you can see, it is old, obviously, because we're talking 1700s. It did have an inscription on it, it used to, but it's well gone, and it's just this big slab now. But it is quite a significant one. It's not a small grave like a lot of these others. There's also a nursery rhyme, a local nursery rhyme associated with this, or again, part of the legend is that if you, as a kid, you were always warned about this. If you come here to her grave, and if you run around her grave anti-clockwise and sing Molly Leigh, can't catch me, if you do that 3 times, she will pop out of her grave and come and chase you out the churchyard. So shall we give it a go? No, we're not giving it a go. We're not going to do that. Too bloody scared to. Well, imagine that. I did say there was another side to this story there, which it may be less interesting. I still find it interesting. Maybe it's the true side of the story, probably the more truthful account, but it's a fun legend anyway. But there is evidence that suggests, of course, well, if you believe in witches or not, whether that's true. There's some evidence that suggests that she was a pretty kind, charitable woman, actually. And all this is completely just a smear, which a lot of the time it was with witches, of course. So a copy of a will was found in the archives, I imagine the Staffordshire archives, and suggested some very interesting things, that Molly was actually quite a successful businesswoman, landowner. We've talked about her milk, selling her milk into the town, which was probably true, but she did own actually a fair amount of land as well, which she must have made money off, rent and all sorts, and selling animals or produce, because a copy of a will was found, and she actually left quite a few things to her relatives, so she actually did have relatives, and that also suggests that her parents didn't die young, because I think in her will she leaves stuff to her parents, so she actually died before her parents, so you can debunk that bit of the legend. And she actually supposedly left a decent amount of money to charitable organisations, to feed poor and stuff around here, which is a very unwitch-like thing to do. Molly even wanted some of the money after she died to be used to build a hospital in the area as well, but this actually never happened, unfortunately, even though it was one of her requests. So all this information is a bit of a far cry from the evil witch, which is probably obviously bullshit, but it's a good story. So it's actually thought that this Parson guy, who was a priest here, it's thought that possibly he must have kind of started all these stories because Molly left no money to the church in her will or anything, so this pissed him off, and he might have, no one knows obviously, but he might have conjured up all these tales to discredit her and disgrace her name. And the reason she left no money to church, because apparently she was was a religious woman in the true story that we know of from facts and suggestions, not part of the legend, that she was a religious woman, but Parsons was a heavy drinker and she didn't like that, so she didn't leave anything to his church, because she probably didn't think he was truly a godly man, and this obviously annoyed him to death, and he might have made up all these stories about it, so he might possibly be the real villain of the story, but who knows, maybe it's a mixture of both. A lot of these sort of legends and things, there's probably nuggets of truth in there, you know. Well, she was alone, never married, we know that, so you know there's certain things. Maybe she did have pet birds and whatnot, so there's probably nuggets of truth in this, but it seems like it's possible that it might have been all made up by this Parsons guy who just had a deep grudge against her. And when you look at the grave, this is, you know, it sort of makes sense really, because as I've said before, it's quite a big grave, it's quite an extravagant grave, you know, it's a tomb essentially. So why would someone spend so much money on such a grave like this if she was a witch? You know, if she was a witch and everyone knew it, you'd probably bury her in unmarked or something, wouldn't you? You know, you wouldn't give her a big tomb like that, unless she paid for it herself, which maybe, you know, she probably did. But it's a bit fishy, isn't it? You know, why has she got this quite extravagant grave, and why did Parsons, you know, bury her here still and perform everything like that if she really was this evil woman? But yes, that is the story of Molly Leigh, the local witch of Burslem. True or false, who knows? Who knows what is the real story? But it's a fun story, and it's an interesting bit of history around this area, which, if you're from Stoke, you'll probably know about, and will be sick to death of hearing about it. Really, you know, it's interesting because most local areas have something like this. So it's always interesting to expose them and talk about them, and especially nowadays, because I think people are starting to forget Molly Leigh, even like now. New generations, probably they're not really being told as much. It seems to be less and less. You know, if you talk to older people about it, they sort of know, where younger people might not have even heard of her, even from these parts. Well, yes, that is this episode of Graveyard Stories, Molly Leigh, in St Johns Churchyard. So you can just come here, and it's very easy to find. Literally, there's a road right here, and it's an easy grave to find because it is the only one in the churchyard facing this way. All the others face east to west. So yes, that's the video. Hope you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you want to see more stuff. Be some more videos coming. Oh, I actually should announce as well, make an announcement that soon, next month, there will be hiking and history videos. We're going international. I'm going to be going to Malta in March 12th, I think it is, and I'm going there for 3 days, just travelling. So I'm going to make some videos there as well. So look forward to Maltese content. There should be some interesting stuff there. It should be good. But that is it for this video. That's it for Molly Leigh there. We'll wave goodbye to her. And yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Bye.